I lost you a lot for some reason again.
Soy Montserrat Peidró y estáis viendo Packside Live.
Packside Pro Services really gets to act as an extension of your team. So when you come across a new deployment and you need help, don't have the bandwidth or the expertise to do the project, this is where we can jump in and help along the way.
Enable our partners' growth through scalable and repeatable implementation and technical services.
Taking the partners on their growth journey.
We can really help a partner that's doing a particular kind of project for the first time by working through it with them.
We make it as easy as possible, and typically this is through a one-touch click into our cloud commerce marketplace.
Our services are repeatable. They are fixed scope. There's no unpredictability.
We look to take what is sometimes complex technology solutions, and we essentially make it simple for our partners to leverage those different tools through our package offerings, so that we can come in and work as an extension to your team and deliver those solutions to your customers.
We have the expertise to be able to take on project work for you if you just don't have the bandwidth for it right now, or we can teach you how to do it.
And that's where Packside Academy comes in. We've got programs that help the partner in the way they want to learn. We've got all this free on-demand content.
We have a number of subject matter experts keeping up to speed with the latest developments and enhancements, features and functionality.
There's always going to be vendors added, and if it has our approval, that means it's going to serve you.
If you're interested in learning more, simply check out the Packside Professional Services Engagement SKU in the Packside Marketplace at no cost, and our team will be in touch.
Help propel your business forward right out of the cloud commerce marketplace at Packside.
What's up, everyone? Happy Wednesday, and welcome to the game on Packside Live, the show where we talk about all the cybersecurity shenanigans you need to know about. Although we're going to do something a little different today. We're going to talk about scopes of work and how important they are, and kind of how you can go about creating scopes of work that enable project survivability and success. But before we do that, let's do the housekeeping. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Definitely comment. The best place to comment is going to be on youtube.com/Packside Live. That is the side of the stream that our producers see, and they can actually bring your comments up and we can talk about them. So definitely join us on YouTube. If you're not, don't forget to sign up for Packside Beyond. And let's see, if you're at the mission briefing in Denver tomorrow, I'll see you there. Let's get Matt on. And just before we kicked off the show, producers are going to kill me, but I called an audible and I want to share this news article. So Matt, what's happening?
Man, we're bringing back the news, Dom. Did you just like conjure up bringing back the news out of nowhere without even asking anybody? That's pretty. I mean,
it just happened. Big. You know, we had a few seconds before the show started, so I pulled up the record, and I saw Move It, and I was like, man.
Oh. No, you must have been rewinding to June last year. That's not now.
I know. I made sure I wasn't on the Wayback Machine, and I wasn't. So I was like, "This, you can't be serious." So,
you're killing me.
This is the article, right? And so Delta and Amazon confirm vendor breach as dark web posts revive Move It leak concerns. So I only had time to skim it, right? But it would seem that I don't think this is a new attack. I think this is
probably speaking back to that time frame. Yeah.
Right. And there's
we're now
starting
to see
data
that
for sale.
23 companies lumped into that group from Nameless, which is the name of the organization, popped in and said, "Hey, guess what? We got all this data." And you're probably right. This is some of that kind of amalgamation of that data coming to roost, if you will. So yeah,
you know, like,
and
please patch. I don't even know what to say.
please patch. Just like, don't keep old systems around. Don't put super sensitive data around, and not patch it, and patch the systems that come to it. Yeah, I guess this is your one call to action of the week for that. So I guess Delta and Amazon, and I love just how nonchalantly they're like, "Hey, just wanted you to know, a system that we didn't patch. Like, yeah, get popped, bro. Like, it did. Like, all your data's gone. It has, like, all this information about your flight history. No, don't worry about it. Move along. Nothing to see here. I digress.
Yeah.
Dom just wanted to trigger me to start this show off. That's fantastic. But
it just blew my mind, man. I was like, it was a good nostalgia because we were last talking about Move It, on the news segment. So I was like, let's just cover this.
In fact, there's still a non-zero number of entities that had threatened to sue me for some of the work I was doing on Move It, if you recall, from a year and a half ago. 2 years ago.
I do recall. Yeah.
I digress. The call to action today, and I'm going to put back on a hat, man, because I was not the best project manager. I'm just going to say that in case Sheldon Phillips is watching right now with his PMP and all of those things. But I did run project management for my organization for a while. And one of the key things to success that's so freaking critical is a good statement of work. And they can be bad for a lot of reasons. Sometimes for being overly descriptive, sometimes for being underly descriptive, if that's a possible word. Dom, I think this is something that's right in your wheelhouse right now. You run a lot of the pro services division and arm of Pax8, if not all of it. Do you own all of it at this point for pro services?
On this side of the world, yeah.
That's fair. Okay. It's good. I knew the world was flat. So fair. This half of the flat world is Dom. The other half of the flat world, no. No, I tease, man. But what are your thoughts on this, man? How important is a statement of work when project services go, before we kick off to
I think
Robin?
If you're doing any kind of service, this isn't just technical or not just security. If you're doing any kind of service, you need some form of agreement, right? And the truth is, it can be really simple. Like tort law allows for an agreement between two humans or entities to be extremely simple, so long as all the terms are understood and there's consideration involved, right? Somebody's getting compensated in some form or fashion. But where it goes wrong is when you start doing detailed implementations that have outcomes and impacts and potentially change risk profiles and things like that. If we're not on lock and agree to what we're going to be doing together, we're going to have a real problem. So the idea of your statement of work or your scope of work is that everything you're doing together is accounted for, right? And who's responsible for what? We're going to spend a fair amount of time on that, is accounted for. We've grown this, I'm 5 years and a month into Pax8 almost, right? Or a little over that. So we've grown our scoping practices dramatically to where, we cut 100 to 150 scopes during our busy months, right? So we've gotten pretty efficient at it, but we've also really evolved how do we cut a specific scope that, our partners understand and that they can take and translate to their clients, and they know what they have to do, we know what we have to do, and there's success there. And then scaling that model. So, but that's the lifeblood of our team, is what's in the scope. Right.
And so very many MSPs out there, right? I don't know very many MSPs that don't have a pretty large top line revenue of project work, right? Whether they've baked it into some of their MSP services, or whether they've baked it as a separate line item. Either way, there's a fair amount that goes into it, and there's a lot of scope bleed, and there's a lot of scope challenges. And then the other piece that I want to cover, because this is the game and we are a cybersecurity focused show, is the cybersecurity impact of change management. You called this out very early. Like, we're going to be doing changes to stuff that has real world impacts that could down the road be, well, you said you were going to implement this type of MFA. MFA wasn't implemented this way. We got popped. We need to talk about culpability and responsibility and things of that nature, right? So that piece of it is one of the things I want to try to focus on as we talk about this today.
Yeah, 100%.
What mug made it out? Center for Cybersecurity, National Center for Academic Excellence at the NSA. That's fair.
There's definitely a bug in that mug.
Yeah, fair. True
before we jump in, let's hear some really brilliant words from Robin, who is in the midst of audits this week. So let's hear from her.
Are you ready?
Let's talk about data governance. That's actually not a topic that was high on my radar. And I tell you what actually changed my mind about it is AI. As we start using things like Microsoft Copilot and different things like that, one of the things they talk about is you need to have good data governance and data hygiene in your organization. Otherwise, you can end up overexposing data pulling in data that is obsolete. So you might be making decisions on data that's not even good anymore. And you might end up inadvertently sharing something out in the wild to all your staff when they're doing their little Copilot queries that you didn't intend because you don't have the right controls over the data in your ecosystem. And I'm going to tell you, companies have so much data. We've got data here, data there, customer data, employee data, prospective people's data that we might be doing business with. Data is everywhere. And one of the things that companies are going to have to shift to is the concept of data governance. We're going to have to really put guardrails around our data, make sure we're classifying it correctly, make sure we're handling it correctly. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've created a file, even personal file, and I was just too lazy and I didn't want to fill out the metadata for it. Well, you know what? That metadata becomes really important when you're starting to use things like different AI tools, because that data actually helps identify, should I pull this in to this query? Should I pull this in as a result of this prompt, or should I exclude it? And also controls. Who can see what? What's locked down? What's classified? What's internal? What's highly classified? What needs to only be seen by your executives? What only needs to be seen by, certain people conducting certain roles? The whole concept of data governance, it's huge. And it's not something larger companies are even good at. And smaller companies, small and medium-sized businesses, are often not thinking about how much data they have within their ecosystem. And so we want to get to the point where we are actually treating data like it's not gold anymore, it's platinum. We need to treat data like it is one of our core assets of our business that needs to be protected. And the way you're going to do that is with data governance. So the resource that I have for you on that, again, I like Udemy when the classes are on sale. There is a data governance class on Udemy that I'm going to recommend that covers the whole life cycle of data. And yes, data has a life cycle. How you bring it in, how you handle it, and how you share it, how you archive it, and when it's time, how you delete it. And I'm going to say one more thing about data and deleting data. That's a new ISO control. There are companies, just like there are people, they never purge anything. I actually have my baby booties. Why am I holding on to them? They're just so precious. And my little white gloves from when I used to go to, Easter, and I still have those things. And while that's nice and that's going down memory lane, you don't want to do that with data. When data is no longer needed, it needs to be purged, and it needs to be purged securely. And so that's not going to happen if you don't have an inventory of where your data is and when it should be purged and who should have access to it. So this whole thing about data governance, go to Udemy and get that data governance course. It's probably about 20 hours. It's really worth understanding what the whole discipline of data governance is about. And it starts small. You're not going to eat the elephant in one bite. Start small, but do get started. That's a good goal for 2025, to establish some level of data governance within your organization.
Level up. Level up. I love listening to Robin's giggle when she says something like, some people don't even delete their data. It's delicious. It's absolutely delicious. Anyways, I totally feel you on that one. All right, so we're going to get started on this. Dom has already got himself set up for this, so I'm just going to intro us in. But Dom's set up to show us a existing scope of work from Pax8 Pro Services. It's been denatured. There's nothing in there that would be any OPSEC challenge, and it's one that he would just send you if you were doing a work. So there's nothing in this that is proprietary that can't be shared. what we hope you garner out of this are some of the components and things that come into this discussion that have developed over the years from Dom and team doing this hundreds and hundreds of times a month. Dom, let's go to you, brother. Show us what we got here.
Yeah, let's do it. So this is a fake real live scope of work document. So I made this in our proposal tool with no sort of actual data around who we would be doing services for. But what we did is we sort of picked a service that we do a lot of, and I whipped out a scope. So you're going to see a lot of this like variables and stuff. Obviously, when you receive that, you know, they'd be filled in, which kind of speaks to point one is knowing how your scopes are going to be formatted, right? So we have an internal KB, and there's a whole section for scopes and how they need to be architected and what they need to include and how to do a risk analysis on different potential outcomes and those sorts of things. So as you start to scale a service practice, you've really got to standardize that. So every scope of work that comes out of my team looks something like this, right? In fact, if you're only this far in, it probably looks exactly like this, right? And that's because of that standardization work we've done. I think the second point is we've scaled a lot in 5 years. So if we're sending 100 scopes a month, or if you're sending, I think even 30 or 40 scopes a month, you're not going to write them in Word. I promise you, you're gonna get real tired of writing them in Word. It's just going to be what it is. So you're eventually going to get like a CLM tool or a proposal tool to do all this for you, right? So at Pax8, we use a tool called Panadoc, but there's a million and one of them out there, and that allows, you know, I made this in all of about 4 minutes, right? Now it's not completely filled out, so you know, if my team's watching, don't shame me on this incomplete scope. But yeah, let's dive into it, right? And so these are proposals, and it's okay to have a little bit of fluff, right? There's no language in what our marketing crew helped us write about pro services that's going to jeopardize this engagement, right? So you can pitch a little bit. Your proposal and scope of work can be in the same document. So, you know, it has fancy about us. You know, if you get proposal, you've seen this. We even have a little video that if you're looking at your scope on the web, you can see that, right? We kind of brag about ourselves and all that stuff. It's okay to do a little bit of that, but let's get to the meat of it. So if we're writing a scope of work, obviously the most important thing is what are we doing, right? Like what are we actually trying to accomplish out of this relationship, be it a long-term relationship and a managed service agreement, or be it a short-term relationship and a mail migration? What are we actually trying to do? Who's involved, right? So in contracting lingo, you call that the parties, who's involved in this transaction, and then what's coming out of it. So if you're designing a solution, and I used to get stuck on this all the time, so I want to call it out. If I'm a nerd, which I am, I'm digging into like different like Azure sizes, and I'm digging through all the licensing, but I haven't actually asked the customer what they want. Right? Like what is the business outcome? What is the business objective? Matt, I'm sure you've done that more than once too, over time. So our scope's open.
And just to bring us up to speed real quick of where you are. So first is have a process, just for everybody playing at home, if you want takeaways. If you're going to do statements of work, have a process. Number 2, standardization allows for scale across the board. Your proposal can contain your statement of work. And in that statement of work, the first thing we want to tackle is the what. The parties, that's the who kind of, at least it's involved. But the what aspect that you're trying to tackle is like, when I'm done with this, what makes you happy? What are those defined outcomes? What would you sue me if it was not in this state? Like those are kind of what we're really trying to define here, right? In plain words, as much as possible. So yeah, continue.
Yeah, and that's a big one. So like the terms and conditions of our relationship are governed by terms and conditions. That they're referenced in the scope, they're not in the scope, right? So there's, you know, our fantastic legal team actually just recently kind of brought them up to speed. There's pro services terms and conditions that you agree to by signing this, but they're not explicitly in here. There's a link to them, and that gets rid of so much mess, right? You know, obviously consult your own attorney, but referencing through links is relatively widely accepted in the legal space. So we can really get to the meat of the solution and let the terms govern our relationship. So you'll see a couple of things here that I want to call out that I don't think are unique to us, but something that took us a little bit too long to embrace. The first sentence in our scope of work is this is going to be a shared responsibility project.
I'm in love right now.
Right out of the gate, right? And that's hugely important. Now there's a lot of projects where
for anybody playing at home though that does follow the drink every time Matt says shared responsibility model or shared responsibility matrix, you do need to understand that Dom is a direct extension of that game, and if you are at home listening to this, you must drink at this time. Okay, continue, Dom.
Oh man, it's gonna be a long show for them.
Is it though? Okay. Sorry for any dead people out there.
So the first sentence is like, this is a shared responsibility project. And in IT and technology and security, almost all your projects are shared responsibility. You will have things that you cannot accomplish without your customer. We have things that we cannot accomplish without help from the partner. It just is what it is. Obviously, this is a sample, so it's between PAX 8 and PAX 8. That's it shouldn't happen, but. And in our case, we have a third party because we're doing work for your customers on your behalf. So we have these three parties. So SRMs, shared responsibility models, hugely important in our space. Then we have projected outcomes, right? And this is a really simple one because this is such a light touch implementation for us. But as we get more nitty gritty, you're speaking to what happens, what do things look like when we're done? What's our desired state?
Yeah.
So it might be this customer is now, all their data is in SharePoint or all their emails in Exchange Online.
You're now doing vulnerability scanning across the board for assets in there, right? Whatever it may be that we're trying to define, and what the outcome is
in a business sense
directly. Yeah,
right.
In a business sense.
Right. And then the very next thing is we're now starting to assign some of that shared responsibility, right? So this is a little bit new for us in our process, and it's made an immediate difference. And the idea is that all the humans involved in this project, whose name resides in an A column, so accountable, right, on the RACI matrix, they're listed in this document. And we have some language, we don't have to go through all the words, but we have some language that allows you to assign someone and that sort of thing. So if you get sick, the project isn't dead in the water. But we have roles
the
for
comma
different
space
parties.
and their delegates part of that, right? Yeah, exactly.
Right. And I realized I totally made an oops by making this between PAX 8 and PAX 8, but you would typically see the
It does make it very tough to
name.
tell where that line of demarcation exists, for sure. It's all right, though.
So these top two typically would be PAX 8, which we have an operations manager who would be your project manager, their contact information. And then we actually very frequently, we have teams of engineers. So we very frequently move projects amongst engineers. So in our case, we say the engineering team will deliver this. The project manager is your primary contact. And the reason for that is if an engineer gets sick, I still want to be able to cut over your mail migration or whatever you're doing. So that
has direct one-to-one corollary, though, Dom, for MSPs. Like, even with us, when I think we had 4 project team members at the time when I was doing that, we absolutely had 2 different. We had the team be what was delivering it. We actually had 2 different teams, but the teams would deliver it, and that way it could be either of those humans in each of those 2 teams. But could call out for others as well.
And the project manager is always named. So if the project manager goes out, that team is fantastic. They're really good at making sure they have coverage and that sort of thing. So that part takes care of itself. And then we have different roles. In our case, it's the partner. In your case, your customer. You always have an executive sponsor. The executive sponsor is the one with the authority to sign a contract and write you a check, right? Like that's who that person is every time. So we classify him as the decision maker, scope signer, and that sponsor. Depending on who we're working with. If you're a small MSP, you might be fulfilling all 3 of these roles, and that's okay. But you're now accountable for all 3 of these roles, right? And for larger MSPs that we do work for, there's probably a professional services VP signing this, and we probably won't hear from that person again unless we need a change order, which we'll get to in a minute. But then they should have a project manager of some form or fashion. And in a lot of MSPs, it's not a professional project manager, and that's okay. Just needs to be someone capable of understanding the steps of the project and where it's at, and their own team's
and often becomes that liaison aspect back to the client about where the project is, with the ability to communicate that. So whether that's a real project manager, dedicated human, or whether that's an infrastructure admin or a technician or someone that owns that, they're going to be the one to get the, hey, our team looks like we're done moving these pieces of data. I need you to stop using this data so we can move over and make the cutover, right? Like that kind of coordinative aspect. Is that a fair way to say it, Tom?
Yeah, they're really sort of playing air traffic control with all the moving parts of the project. So our PM team's doing that at mass scale, but in particular for this project. So they're just passing on the information to the partner's project manager or the customers who now needs to help us coordinate, make sure nothing breaks while we do phase 3 or whatever. And then we need
Which
a technical
brings us to the next role.
Right. So for us, again, we're shared responsibility for most of our projects. Partners will need to execute certain tasks or certain customer support items and those sorts of things. So we're going to make you designate who's the technical person, who's the nerd, who's going to talk with our nerds and help us accomplish this mission. So in a customer scenario, you might not always have this, right? But you're definitely going to have an executive sponsor and someone that is helping on the other end of this agreement coordinate all the moving parts. And then that technical POC, that's who we're going to get credentials from. That's who we're going to coordinate. We need you to get this piece of PowerShell out or this. I
mean, how many times have you had a hybrid Exchange server where it's like way more problems than were described before, and you have to then work with them for that migration of mail, or maybe in that case, hopefully those days are so far behind.
Hybrid Exchange is always a problem, by the way.
It is always.
We get it done, but it's always a problem.
It is always a problem. At least for me, it was always.
So these parties, right? So if you look at the format, like these humans are all, they all have. They belong to one of the parties in the contract. They're one of these humans, and then they get this role. So the beauty of doing it this way is that for the rest of this document, I don't have to say Matt's name. I need to say the technical contact. So when we're writing these and we're writing various templates, this table is the same on every single scope of work we send. And as a result of that, when my team is building new projects and writing new scope language, they only need to reference who we're talking about, which is going to be, the project manager or the technical POC or whoever that is.
There's another value in this too, Dom. When reviewing a project to understand critical moments of who's involved, who's responsible, who's talked to, who do I need to look for, what are the comms, who the next, they're right there. They're always right there. They're in the same exact place in the same exact way every time. It's speed of that scale of the normalcy.
And we both signed and agreed to that, right? We've, as the executive sponsor on either side, we've both agreed that these are the humans, these are the people that are working together, right? Whether they're delegating or doing, it doesn't matter. And then we say that, again, we work with a lot of smaller MSPs. Matt, you might be all three of these people, and that's okay. But it's really important that you understand you're now accountable for all this, right?
All of the tasks in the shared responsibility matrix for anyone playing at home with the drinking game. And do you actually go into some educative aspects of RACI, or really just lean on here's what you're responsible for and call it out directly from that perspective?
We'll get to that,
Okay, fair enough.
Then,
I will wait and see.
So PaxA Pro Services is modular, right? So we're in Americas. We serve, I don't even know anymore, some 18,000 partners. So that not every project is bespoke. So a lot of this is templated. So we're going to get into some document formats that aren't going to make sense for every MSP, but I do think they're going to make sense for anything you want to scale. But we have effectively SKUs, projects in a box, right? Internally, we call them packs, and it's basically a fixed set of services. And in our CLM tool, that's all accounted for. So my team, when they're building 100 of these in a month, they're actually clicking through and saying they need this, and it pulls all this language in for them. So that's a really cool thing. Obviously, I didn't fill out all the variables, but we'll get there. So let's talk about like defining the actual work. And we do it in two phases. So this is a service, right? And it's actually a business premium adoption service. It's something that's pretty popular. We do several of them a month. And one of the things that I see a lot of people, and I used to do when I wrote scopes, was I really tried to make them this legalese, contracty, Harvard-like document. And that's just not what a scope should be. The more plain English you can write in your scope, the better. Now, there are certain elements that we've worked with our legal team on making sure we're assigning things appropriately. But in general, a scope is just a document that says who's going to do what. You don't have to overthink it. And that goes back to letting the terms govern the relationship and letting the scope govern the actions, right? So you'll see it's really simple. Like, we're going to do these things for this customer, right? And, in the intro, it says on behalf of the partner. And this is a really high level overview. So these are the different things we're going to do as a part of this project. So this particular one, just so everyone knows, is some work in Intra. So that's MFA, that's passwordless. And if the customer or partner wants it, that's sort of some geofencing, Windows and cloud config, which is probably one of the greatest Intune inventions ever, mobile application management, and Defender for Office. So that's what this implementation entails. So it sounds like a broad implementation, but the truth of the matter is we can scale it way down in terms of what the steps are, because it's repetitive, right?
Yep.
So to start, we really like to do a high-level overview. Here are the things we're going to do, not necessarily how we're going to do it, but the things we're going to do. Because these can be long documents, right? This is a short service, and it's a 20-page document because we're just covering all the what ifs, and we'll get to that. But if you get to page 5 and you're actually reading, I feel pretty good about how we've built the document. So if you've gotten one of these, let me know if you get to page 5. But it's a high-level overview, and this is actually something from our perspective, because I need you to sell this to your customer, Matt. You could take this language and just reuse it, right? It doesn't get into the nitty-gritty that you probably don't need with the customer. So that's that, and then there's this paragraph here, and this is where we start to get into SOWs being protective, right? So we've laid out all the things we're going to do, right? And then it says right here, this is it. This is all we're going to do.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if it's not here, we're not doing it. And SOWs aren't exclusionary documents; they're inclusionary documents.
That's
and
correct.
We can get carried away saying it doesn't include this, it doesn't include that. We're talking about like Intra ID here. So we're enabling 3 features, which means there's like 408 other features that I can't list all
Right.
those.
Right.
So we want our SOWs to be comprehensive about what we're going to do, not what we're not going to do. And then we just say, everything here is what we're doing. Anything not in here is what we're not doing. Right.
That's a critical takeaway, though. Like, when you're making your statement of works, I would say this is probably one of the biggest points you've made so far, which is say what you're going to do very plainly, right? You said it is start with simple, right? Start with a simple way of explaining this. Be simple. This person's responsible for this person's responsible for that, and here's what we're going to be doing.
Right.
If it's not listed in here, we're not doing it, right? And that's a very clear point. And the other side you have to get into then, Dom, and we'll get back to this as you go into it, you have to be sure you're not doing it. Like, when you get down to the security of this, when it comes to change control, if I say I'm changing these things, one cannot then change other things as part of it without changing this statement of work, right? Like, no matter which, even if it's just a freebie and a click here, like, I don't want to get up too wound up.
And that's the toughest thing, is you grow your service team. Like, we have fantastic engineers on our team, and they want to help people, which I love.
They just want to give
so much. Yeah. But as soon as they step out of the scope, we're opening up risk.
That's
right.
Exactly
From a CYA perspective, I call it. And this is what I coach the team all the time. You have to be constantly CYAing, right? Like, it's now a verb, because if it's not written down that we agreed to that and we haven't disclosed the risks involved with it, it's now our risk to carry, which is what change orders are for. And we'll get into that in a minute. So we do a whole lot of change orders, and that's pretty normal in a service practice. So now we've covered the what. We start to get a little bit into the how. And there's a few elements here. Prerequisites. So what are the things that need to exist for me to be able to do this project? So for us, like, if you want us to implement Business Premium, I need you to buy Business Premium, right? For us, we do require, because we're PAX 8's ProServe team, we require that you buy the licensing through PAX 8, right? We're not shy about that. That's one of the rules. So that's in here. Requiring, here's how we're going to get the credentials. Here's what credentials we need. And this is a simple project. So here's like the licensing requirements and those sorts of things. As you get further into this, we dive into, for bigger projects, I need a list of users, or I need this type of Exchange admin account, or you need to poke these holes for our migration, whatever the case may be. Your prerequisites section is laying out, I cannot succeed if you do not do these things. Right. And we start to show off some simple shared responsibility here. So we And we made it really easy. We make the word partner bold so that you can see that, and then we put an asterisk. So anywhere you see asterisk partner, I need you to do a thing for us to be able
Not going to
move
use an
forward.
R, Dom, so that way it's R for responsible instead of A for responsible. Come on, bro. I mean, I just have to punch you once. But to your point,
So
they're
that's-
both now responsible and accountable. And
Right.
for this to be successful, they have to be responsible to get this done and accountable to it getting done before I can move forward, right? Just to be super
Exactly,
racy,
yeah.
down the racy path.
Right.
But yeah.
And that's it for prerequisites for this one. So this is a really light touch project, but prerequisites are something that somebody needs to do before I can actually start the work we just agreed to. So if it's anything big, it needs to be part of the project, especially if you're doing it. All the prerequisites you're going to see from us
And
are
for
things
you
that
as
we
an
need from you.
MSP, this can be stuff like I need all the machines on that day.
Right.
Right? Especially if
Right.
you're doing a remote deployment of something. Like those are going to be those basic things that you're saying, hey, if I'm going to do this, then I need these requisites in place. Yes, you do need to already have the cables patched and patched down to the system. It can't just be there. They can't just be hanging from the ceiling.
Right.
That's going to add 5
Right.
hours to this, at least for you to
Right.
get the 5 I need up and functional potentially out of that hunted set of cables. Ask
Right.
me how I know. Anyways, I
And
digress. But yeah.
in our model, like we will not kick off your project with engineering, because once you sign a scope, it goes to our operations group, and the pre-sales folks you work with are going to handle the prerequisites with you. So until you complete the prerequisites, we're not scheduling you with engineers, because engineers are busy, right? And I need them a certain amount of billable and these sorts of things. So prerequisites are hugely important for us. You will not get a kickoff call until you get prereqs done. And
We're never
yours-
going to get through this just because you have so many good nuggets, Dom. This is another one of those of like having the prerequisites be validated by somebody other than the limited resource that you have, right? If you have
Right.
2 good project techs, don't make them also do their requisite. I had a project tech
Right.
named Javier, who is the best project tech still to this day that I've ever met in my life. If, comma, space, he shows up to a ready to function job. If not, he may throw a lady out a window. Like he genuinely is a horrible person if he shows up and something's out of sort. He loses it. And I will say there's a value though in how much his time is worth and having somebody else do it. So Don, that's cool that you have an ops team that does that prior to engineer engagement.
And
That's really neat.
they're fantastic at it. And it's again, as you scale, you need to consider breaking those functions out, right? You should eventually have a PM team, because if you're coordinating 30, 40, 50, 100 projects, engineers are not project managers. They are not. They can struggle through it at small scale. They are not project managers at large scale. They need project management help, right? Yeah, I see you pointing yourself. So I'm going to breeze through this one, but this one is assumptions, right?
Yeah.
And this is different than prereqs, and I've actually gone back and forth with folks about this. Assumptions are things that we think are true, right?
That's correct.
And an assumption is a risk. You know what they say about assumptions, right?
They make
So-
something out of you and me, as I understand it.
Exactly. Yeah. But there are certain things that like maybe neither of us can control. That's a big one for assumptions. So like the power is going to be working that day, right?
Yep.
Oddball things like that. There's going to be a stable internet connection through the course of this migration.
Why do
If
we
there's
care about
not-
those things, Dom? Why do we care about codifying them?
It's a little bit of pre-winning the blame game. Like if you and I both agree that
That's
we're going to
what I mean.
migrate bail, but we've written down that if the internet goes down, it's going to delay everything. When the internet
Yep.
goes down, we don't have to argue about it. We could say, no, it's outside of our control.
And
Nobody's getting any relief, but we're stuck here.
Yeah, and additionally, it also sets context of what was understood in the writing of this agreement, right? Like it's
Right.
like you walk in and they're like, "Yep, we have the assumption that you'll have adequate data capabilities to migrate to the cloud." You get there and they have 0.1 meg up, and you're like,
Right.
"Okay, this assumption was clearly blown. It is going to take 5 months. We need to ship you a drive.
Right.
That's going to be expensive. We're going to have to do this differently." Like whatever, right? Like, so yeah, I love that this gives what I like to call assumptions is context setting things that
Right.
were in our contextual understanding in our paradigm of how we viewed this when we decided to do this project is my thought.
Right. And it also can convey limitations. So in a lot of our environments, like we're not going to write you custom code or custom controls in
Right.
CA. So we cover that. Like we're going to accomplish it based on best practice, based on what's available, primarily so that we don't leave you with something you can't support. Like that's a huge part of our mission is don't give you something you can't drive. Important deadlines. These are just the things that like we agree to schedule your kickoff call within 10 business days after you finish the prereq, right? We anticipate the project to take this long. It shouldn't take longer than this. Here's how user acceptance testing works and the time that you have to conduct user acceptance testing. How cutovers are scheduled is a big one. We have rules around that. Essentially things like that. But there's a big one here, and this, I think this probably impacts us more as a third party. If everything just gets stuck and we're not hearing from you, or maybe you're not hearing from your customer, and this project just dies for 120 days, we are actually going to cancel it, because I can't keep a stuck project on our bench forever. So we do have some guardrails for ourselves in terms of like, look, this just isn't going anywhere. Right?
And we've
So
all
we're
had
gonna-
it, Dom. Like we've all.
It happens.
I've done
Yeah.
this. I mean, I've had to do it
Right.
more ad hoc. I wasn't that smart. But yeah, you get that one project where you know that the customer's already gone cold on it. They've paid what they've paid into it. They don't know that they want to move forward with it. Like that's happened, right? And it's one of those things where I on my KPIs it looks like crap. On the management of a contract in a revenue cycle is a pain in the butt. There's all kinds of challenges with it, let alone what Pax8 faces, which is a lot of our projects that we put together are funded partially, if not or fully sometimes, by third parties like Microsoft and others, right? So that now has its own set of requirements for us turning in these things, and so it gets even more hairy. So I understand why you.
And
do
that's a lot of people don't know that, right? If Microsoft's funding your Azure project, I'm on a clock to get them all the paperwork.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
Here's
I
the
don't get
time. Here's
paid.
the finish.
Right.
That's
yeah.
right.
And then Rex calls me, so we don't want.
Yeah,
that.
never good. He says, "Why do you not inspect what you expect, Dom?" Anyway.
Right. Yeah. So timelines are really important, but and this is huge.
Expectations.
We're not building skyscrapers here, right? We don't need down to the minute the concrete truck's going to get here at 10:06, which means the dude smoothing out the concrete needs to be here at 10:04. Like, we're not dealing with that. Like, so we try to say, hey, we anticipate this to be done. You'll see in a lot of our migration scopes, we give ourselves room because the internet gets wonky, Azure has a bad day, whatever happens, it's going to change the timeline. So we won't commit you to 1 day level timelines. When we give you something, we might say, hey, you got 3 days to knock this particular task out. And that's because we understand that you're going to have other things going on. And in return, like, you need to understand that we have a lot going on, and we're also reliant on so many factors out of our control. So it's okay.
And if you get to day 2, we might reach out.
Right.
Right. Like,
right. We might bug you.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then, giving yourself wiggle room, especially if you're moving data across the internet, man, you need to give yourself room for it not to go right and for you not to have a change order as a result. So, you might say, we anticipate this migration to take 2 weeks. You might do some bandwidth calculations. Always cut your bandwidth calculations in half and use that as your estimate.
Yep. That's a good
and
number.
give yourself room to say something could happen and could delay this. Right? Write that in your paper.
100%.
All right. And then that covers this individual project. Now we might stack multiple things together in one scope. You can do that. That's how we do it. I picked a light
Each of
touch
them would be a
project.
different service, Dom. Each of them would be
Yep,
their
yep,
unique
yep.
service page like we're seeing here. Yep.
Yep, exactly. So then we get into shared responsibility. And this is where we're now really diving into that shared responsibility matrix for this service, right? We're getting deep. We're saying, here are all the things that need to succeed. And then we get into the work plan. So blah, 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 boring language. We agree to work together. This is the meat and potatoes. And we intentionally decided not to do a racy matrix. So sorry, Matt. But the reason was for simplicity. I want you to be able to read this really quick. I want it to be crystal clear. Another fun thing about our CLM is I can see how long you spend on each page of our scope. Y'all spend like 15 seconds on this page. So I wanted to make it readable in 15 seconds.
That's awesome. Winning.
But it's just, these are the different phases of this particular project, right? So I need the partner project manager and the partner technical contact to work together to get me my credentials and all the other prereqs, right? Everyone needs to be at the kickoff call, right? Our team's going to be accountable for the preparation of this environment, but we might need help from the technical POC. We might run into something, so they support it, right? Same thing. We're here for all the execution. That's what you just hired us for, but we're going to hit a snag or two, guaranteed. We need that technical POC, and that's why we designate one. And then, we get into a phase like testing where, hey, technical POC, make sure this looks like what we said it was going to look like. And this is huge. Giving your POC the opportunity to say, hey, something's weird here. so much better before you make something live, right? It's
Yeah,
so much easier
100%.
for us to be like, oh yeah, we did miss that. Let's go fix it real quick. Or this isn't what I thought it was going to be. You know, you might follow the scope to the letter, but if the business outcomes are miscommunicated in the beginning, which happens, you're going to be in a pickle. And I'd much rather be in a pickle before I go live.
Yeah, 100%. Less mad customers at the end.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. It's so much easier to explain why you're a day
We
late.
do have a
when everything's
comment
broken.
in the chat from Lisa G saying, I can't wait to see how you manage scope creep. And then another one, actually, Lisa G popped in. We got some great questions coming in. So Lisa G also popped in, apologies if this has already been addressed, but how do you keep stakeholders informed of project progress? Also, do you
we're
designate
almost to
one
that part
key
of the scope.
stakeholder to handle all project communications? Go ahead, Dom.
We do. So if you miss it more towards the top, we have that chart of here's the PM on each side. Those are the two key people that always need to be in touch, right?
Yep.
There are some projects, it's very rare because our engineers typically talk to everyone, but there's the occasional project where you never meet your engineer. Extremely rare, but you will never not know who your project manager is, right?
That's
and
fair.
we will never not know who your project manager is. So we'll get to that because we laid this out. So all these things we've added, there's a scar somewhere associated with it, by the way. This is all hard knocks, or most of it is hard knocks.
But great question, Lisa. It tells me you understand that challenge
really
from
great.
stakeholdership being involved. So very good.
Mm-hmm. So now we've gotten through like this is who's responsible and who helps for each of the different phases of that project. Again, it's super high level, which means it's easy to digest. If I need to have a conversation with you about your scope, it takes me no time at all to review it, right? And then throughout the rest of this, gets a reference. So we're always relying on this SRM. And then we get into the actual work plan. Oh, nope, I mixed it up. So now we're in project management. So this is going to answer your question about stakeholdership. So between us, we each have a PM, and now we're designating how everything works. So we always insist on being the lead project manager. And what that really means is that we're ultimately responsible for all the scheduling and execution. And that just protects our team at our scale. So we always take charge of project management, but we work with and collaborate with your project managers, essentially what we're saying here. We cover things like, hey, this is managed in our platform, not yours, right? And that's an important thing because we do work for MSPs and everyone has their own PM tool, but we need to manage our work in our PM tool. But even if you have a more mature customer, they might have a PMO, a project management office, and they might want to manage it. That probably doesn't work for you and your PMO or your PM, right? So doing little things like saying, no, everything's managed in our platform and we'll give you a report, or you might have a portal for it, is just helpful. It prevents an argument that doesn't need to happen. And then we come into project updates, right? And this is that keeping stakeholders update. So we agree in writing that no less than once a week you'll get an update. It's usually more than that, but a migration, at least once a week, I'm going to update you on how much taller the grass is, right? That's kind of what's going on there. And then in terms of when you get into shared responsibility tasks, whoever is accountable for that phase in the SRM needs to be updating the group. It's kind of how we've said that. So for us, it's our project managers delivering all those updates. For you, hopefully it's your PM or whoever is taking on that role. So each stakeholder needs to keep the other up to date. And we typically say, hey, on your side, your technical POC updates your project manager, my technical team updates my project manager, and you all come together and you have an idea of where the project's at. And that essentially happens no less than once a week. It's kind of how we do it. We also set through how we talk to each other, right? We're going to talk to it. We're going to talk through email. Here's how we're going to do that. Here's how we book meetings. Here's who always has to be there, right? So a meeting has to at least have both project managers, and then we'll come out and say, oh, we really need the technical POC, or we might need whoever's doing UAT at the customer or whatever we need. But we're actually stating, here's how we communicate. And that's massive, right? Just having a plan on here's how we talk to each other is helpful. So you're not mixing up text messages and emails and whatever else you have, signals, right? None of that is getting mixed up. And then for us, because we're third party, we can't schedule your customer. We need you to schedule your customer if that needs to happen.
Yeah.
The next one is here's how we communicate secrets with one another, right? We might need admin creds. We might need an API key or something like that. So we actually have a procedure that lines up with our internal data management procedures on how we're going to communicate secrets, right? And in our case, it's between technical POCs on encrypted threads. It's kind of how we handle it. So again, we've eliminated any confusion. If we're communicating a secret or a credential, this is how it happens every time. And this is the one form of communication that PMs are not on, because it's out of their scope. So I'm reducing risk by not over communicating secrets here. So all that's covered. And then you get into the work plan. And I'm not going to beleaguer this, but this is where you get nitty gritty, right? So you'll notice we've been building up to this moment. If you've gotten this far and you're reading your scope, you should have all the information you need. Your customer is very unlikely to read the detailed work plan, right? They're going to read the high level. They're going to read the RACI matrix or the SRM. All of that stuff is going to be what they really need to know before they make a decision.
Yep.
Everything below this point is they're not going to read it. At least my data shows they're not going to read it. So, but I have to have it. And what happens here, and it does happen even with partners, because sometimes we have a misunderstanding, is this wasn't read. And out of that, we have a discussion about it, right? And we go to this work plan and say, here's the work plan we agreed to. So we get really detailed in terms of what's actually going to happen. And I would say this is like a run book with maybe 75% detail, if that makes any sense at all.
Sure.
Like, it's all the steps, but it's not the clicks, right?
What I
so
did
in
want
this
to hone in
case-
on, and it's because Lisa asked about this, is the first thing right there where it says, if any adjustments are needed, comma space, a change order must be mutually agreed upon and executed by all parties before the project can move forward. So meaning we've stubbled our toe on something. We found that there's actually another SharePoint site that they hadn't thought about that has a very different set of scope and a very different structure, and they need to bring this in. That's what we found. How do you handle it, Dom? Let's talk about that. You got 2 minutes to kind of dig in for this part, but let's tackle this question of how do you handle all these change orders, man?
So the biggest problem with the SOW is it assumes everything's perfect and that we've thought of
that's
everything.
not how this
that
works.
Right. So a change order is a well-recognized mechanism to change the scope. You could think of it as like an amendment, right, to this agreement. So when we execute a change order, it's just a document, another document, and it says, hey, we found, you always start with why. You know, we were kicking this project off and we realized there's 15 more mailboxes than we thought. Okay, what are we going to do about it? Well, we're going to add 15 mailboxes to the project. It's going to adjust the project cost by this and whatever else. It might adjust the timeline.
Hopefully adjust your discovery process.
Right.
That you have, anyway, sorry.
And then we're going to, agree to that. So we're just assigning another document that says we've changed the cost by X, which could be 0 sometimes. But more importantly, we've changed this work plan and what we're actually delivering. And what that does is it puts everything in writing again. It brings the CYA factor back because we've now agreed in writing to what needs to happen.
So you've sent me your change order, and I disagree. I don't want to pay $7 more. I'm not going to pay 7 times 15 or whatever that number is. I say no. How do you handle that, Dom? Like, I'm putting you on the spot here, but Lisa's giving me good questions. I don't even have to think. They're amazing.
Yeah. So I use the term material change a lot, right? Because there is such a thing as an immaterial change. If it's 1 extra mailbox, I don't really care. I mean, the risk of that is very low for me. I might have to credit you back an extra license, right? The key to materiality is a couple things. Is it going to cost me more money to deliver you that, right? And if it is, I need to charge you more money. Or am I opening a risk? And if I'm opening a risk or it costs me more money, frankly, like, we're either going to complete a change order, we're going to proceed with the scope of work as it was written that we already agreed to.
Sure,
and if I can't do
answer.
that for some reason, like it's a breaking change order, we're just going to cancel it, right? And we have, again, the terms govern the relationship. We can do that. You should have similar terms in case you need to cancel. So, like, it's that if it's a mandatory change, it's a mandatory change.
That's the nugget. Materiality transitioning to what is my escape plan and what am I going to do? One being, I will cancel. If it's not breaking, I'll still deliver the 22 mailboxes. Sorry about the 7 you didn't think about that work in your office down the street. You could pay more for them, right? And to that point. So Lisa, great questions that you're throwing in here. Change request, how that's accepted, how you manage it. And then the aspect of like, what do I do when they say I'm not signing that change order? Like there's a bail process of what has to happen. And I think the more formal you make that, the more it doesn't seem like you're responding off of the cuff, right? You're actually just, this is the way it works. This is our process. You agreed to it. We have this in T's and C's. You want to dig deep, it's there, right? To your point,
Right.
in that regard. So, all right.
And then I'll wrap this up. So we've gone over all that. Don't forget to put a dollar amount in here, right? Like, here's how much you need to pay me for all this, by the way, right?
Wait, we charge for this?
That's hugely important. So there's, yeah, we do. But at cost, it's a great deal, man.
Yeah, we
You should
do break
definitely check
even
out
on
our
it.
pro serve. So make sure you have a cost table, and we do flat fee. So you're going to get one line item of here's how much this costs, but however you cost it out. And then the one thing I want to make sure, we have all kinds of disclaimers. You might need those, you might not. This is all legal stuff. It does say things like, hey, don't block port 443 on your firewall for migrating your mail. You know, like
Yeah,
don't make crazy changes, those sorts of things. But this is where I was talking about, like, this is it. This is the last page. All the terms and conditions are incorporated by link. And work with your own legal counsel to see if you can do this. But the beauty of that is I don't have another 12 pages of stuff that you're expected to like look at. You are expected to look at it. Let me be clear. But it's not dirtying up this document. Please read the terms. But
it doesn't make this a 40-page document instead of a
Right.
20-page document, right? With a lot of legalese
Right.
to that statement. So, yeah, I think this hits the nail on the head. Lisa says she loves this statement of work so much. If we want to pop that up, it's great to see you here. Thank you, Lisa. Positive Energy earlier said cheers and gave us some laughing faces. So just want to call everybody out. Thank you for being here. Dom, anything you want to add to this before we try to close this out? And I do a horrible job at trying to do my best at statement of work and the play of the game.
no, I think that's it. Start simple. Don't overthink it, but do work with legal counsel on the general format. And remember, SOW is just what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. Don't overthink it. All right, Matt, give us the play of the day.
All right, let's try it. Okay, give me a clock, y'all. Okay, got 60 seconds. Number one, have a process. If you're going to have a statement of work, you have to have a way to make it the same every time, not miss things. Standardization is the only way to scale. Straight up, right? 100%. Proposals contain your statement of work is fine. It bakes it all together, makes it one simple process so that they're accepting that at the end. We start with what we're doing. We talk about who's involved. We really need a RACI matrix to succeed, whether that's a responsibility matrix that's more simplified or whether it's that plainly stated. And also, let's try to make sure that we're using object-oriented things in this so that it's repeatable, it's scalable, meaning instead of me putting Dom's name in there, I say project manager or project owner over and over again. Let's bring it back home for security. Why does it matter? Being able to normalize, templatize, and set the same expectations allows you to have normalized change management, allows you to know what this project and expected outcome will create, and allows you to repeat that over and over and over again. And I think it's one of the key pieces to being able to scale a real security program is understanding your systems. That's it. Have statements of work. Thank you for being here.
Game over.
Well, I think that was a great play of the day. You nailed it. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you so much for the engagement in the comments. It means a lot. We will see you next week. We have Joe Frisk, who's a really smart dude at Pax8. He's in charge of governance, risk, and compliance at a high level, that overall thought behind it. We're going to talk tools. We're going to talk our tools good, our tools evil, but also just GRC chit chat in general. So don't miss it. Same time next week. We'll see you then.